Matthew 21, verses 23 to 32. When he entered the temple, the chief priests and the elders of the people came to him as he was teaching and said, "By what authority are you doing these things? And who gave you this authority?" Jesus said to them, "I will also ask you one question. If you tell me the answer, then I will also tell you by what authority I do these things. Did the baptism of John come from heaven, or was it of human origin?" And they argued with one another. "If we say from heaven," he will say to us, "why then did you not believe him? But if we say of human origin, we are afraid of the crowd, for all regard John as a prophet." So they answered Jesus, "We do not know." And he said to them, "Neither will I tell you by what authority I am doing these things."
Speak to us, God, for we are listening. Speak to us, God, for we are waiting for your voice. Speak to us, God, in our hearts and all around. Tell us what can be, what can be. All True Vows by David White from the House of Belonging. All the true vows are secret vows. The ones we speak out loud are the ones we break. There is only one life you can call your own, and 1,000 others you can call by any name you want. David White rightly suggests that there is only one life that each of us gets to call our own. The lives of others belong to others just as our life belongs to us. All of our days, our experiences, our memories, and our faith, they belong to us. To someone else, they will look, sound, or even taste slightly different, even though they might have sprung from moments we shared together. One hopes, at least one in my position hopes, that there are aspects of the faith journey that resonate collectively for people, moments when everything seems to line up. And we know that we have arrived together at a moment that is sacred. And we breathe. But ultimately, the version of faith that settles into our bones, the one that whispers our names in the wee hours of the morning, that is ours, and ours alone. All the true vows, the secret vows. All the true vows are secret vows. The ones we speak out loud are the ones we break. There is only one life you can call your own. I mention this because the question Scripture puts forth concerns the authority of God and who we allow in our life to have the power to interpret God's presence among us. Jesus in this text is confronting the temple authorities. He is calling into question the very order of Jewish society. While both priests and Jesus agree that only God is God, where they cannot seem to find their way is on the question of who has the authority to interpret God's presence to the people. Jesus brought a challenge to the system wherein the temple priests were the sole interpreters of God's presence, which meant that religious Jews needed to go through them in order to have contact, direct contact with Yahweh. The chief priests, whose authority in Israel was given by God in the time of Moses and had been passed down through generation after generation, naturally pushed back when Jesus, a carpenter's son, questioned their authority as intermediaries of God. Jesus taught and preferred to think that access to God was equally available and accessible to all God's children. That is the basis of Christian doctrine, what Peter would later call the priesthood of all believers, meaning that those who follow Jesus need not have an intermediary in order to have a relationship with God. In her book, The Great Emergence, historical theologian Phyllis Tickles studied the shifts in Western Christianity that have taken place every 500 years or so. Each of these shifts leading to the re-examination of the core question, wherein now lies our authority? She and others consider our current age to be one of these times where the shifts in Christianity are being reshaped through the engagement with that core question, wherein lies our authority? And this makes sense, that we're questioning authority, we're questioning governmental authority, we're questioning those who govern our school systems. Of course, we're questioning our religious leaders. For this is a time in history when it is clear that so many of the things people thought were solutions to yesterday's problems have resulted in new and worsening problems today. There may have been, although I have my doubts, there may have been a time in history when it sufficed to have a high priest, a pope, a patriarch, as an intermediary to God. A time when the breadth and depth of the Holy of Holies was consigned to an inner sanctum and available only through a particular bloodline of holy men. But I can scarcely imagine the God that I have come to know in my lifetime would be content to be restrained in such a way. God comes to whom God chooses, not the other way around. It's been my experience, perhaps yours as well, that although rivers feed into the ocean, no two rivers are alike. And while they share water as their central component, they are far from homogeneous. So it is with God. We all end up at the same destination, but no two paths to get there are identical. It stands to reason that, at least to me, that teachers and classrooms that teach us about God will necessarily change throughout our lifetime. Sometimes that means a new pastor or a different church. It may mean changing denominations or switching religious affiliation altogether. This idea makes some uncomfortable, preferring to believe that one ought to adhere to the religious trajectory to which they were born, and to abandon it reveals a weakness not of the subject, but of the pupil. On the contrary, I believe it shows a great deal of moral fortitude to search until in searching we find the practice, the professor, the classroom, indoor or outdoor, that can reveal for us and in us a more authentic connection with the living, breathing God. Why, I've known Buddhist Christians, Christian Jews, pagan Jewish Christians, even those who have never set foot in a church, who are living the words of Christ every day and in more tangible ways than some who call themselves devout Christians, and who seem to know deeply the presence of God in their lives without credential or title. This past Tuesday morning, I participated in a memorial for a lovely gentleman named Robert, who had attended services here at FCC on and off for the last few years. There were several things that made this service unique. The pandemic, of course, and the rules and regulations attendant to gathering in this time. And Robert's spouse, Richard, who had shared one breath shy of 60 years of couplehood with his beloved. And the service itself was organized around Robert's spiritual journey. Having grown up in a non-religious household, Robert heard a broadcast as a teenager that made him consider for the first time that there might be a God, and that he might be interested in pursuing a life of faith. That road led him first to the Episcopalians in Boston, and then through varying degrees of Christianity and Judaism, back to Christianity, and later in life he found his peace in transcendental meditation and poetry. His partner said that he never discarded any of what he learned from one tradition or the other. He simply integrated it all into the person he became, a person who loved God and loved the life he had been given. As I stood next to my friend and colleague, Reverend Jim Thomas, the pastor of Trinity Episcopal Church, where the service was held, I leaned my shoulder into his. He's a tall man, a warm spirit, and it reminded me of countless hugs I've received over my lifetime from loving male pastors in big, heavy black robes. He held a well-worn Bible in his hands from which he read the prayer for the ending of the service. And together we swayed and we hummed, "Glory, glory, hallelujah, since I laid my burden down." And I felt like I was home. There may be value in abandoning a tree of life that is no longer giving off the sweet perfume of God's presence. But there might be value still in watering that tree, even when it's hard to care for, even when it might feel like there's no life left in it, because God is not the tree, only what we can see of God. And if Jesus is any indication, God has a way of turning things around when we least expect it. There's only one life you can call your